Welcome to the Entrepreneur Strategies Podcast, how to grow your wealth, health, and family well-being. This is a podcast focused on providing valuable insights and inspirations and strategies to entrepreneurs and individuals passionate about business growth and success. And on today's episode, I am very excited. I have somebody who I've known well over social media, and we've actually had a couple of conversations personally. So, Andrew Jolley, I'm really excited to have you on the show, and please feel free to introduce yourself.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be doing this. My name is Andrew. I am a home inspector. My company is named Joda Home Inspections, named after my two kids, Josephine and Danny. That's where the name comes from. So
Oh,
thanks
cool.
for having me here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. So that already is tying into the show. This is again a show about business growth, but also personal health and family well-being. And so already we see with your business, you have made family a focus of the business because it's literally in the name of your show
Sure,
or in the name of your business. Yeah, that's incredible.
it's very true.
So as a home inspector, so I got to imagine. So let's go back to Andrew is 18 years old. At 18 years old, you just got out of high school, presumably, and ne- was it always like? Did you always have an interest in? I mean, clearly not home inspection, but fixing things or figuring out problems to I guess more manual labor type of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I've always been interested in building things and in business. So in high school, as a lot of guys seem to have, I did landscape maintenance. I mowed lawns, and I had a lot of success doing that. And then it kind of snowballed where it was going into the Great Recession, and so I started taking care of a lot of foreclosed homes, and then started cleaning the foreclosed homes, and then started doing routine inspections, and eventually started doing inspections on the foreclosures. And it all started from me mowing lawns in high school to where it just snowballed and grew and grew and grew until I started inspecting for buyers full time.
That's incredible. Yeah. And we have some similarities there. So a story that I don't think many probably know. I haven't really shared it, but I had a lot of entrepreneurial spirit just even from a young kid. But one of my businesses in high school was mowing lawns. So
Wow.
I had a business partner. We split the equipment, and that's really how I got started on my entrepreneurial journey. Was a couple of summers mowing lawns, doing the same exact thing, and we would call lots that would be for sale, and they would have the phone numbers on them. And I would call up those people, cold call them, and say, "Hey, I think your lot would look a lot more attractive if it were like upkept, and so I can, mow your lawns monthly at X dollars." So yeah,
Yeah.
very very interesting story, but
I
mine
never knew that
definitely.
similarity. That's funny.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And what's actually more interesting is that you were able to take that and actually create a career out of it. I somehow went more in the business world and lost any sense of being able to take care of a lawn or
Oh,
do any of
wow.
that. So that's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the questions I probably should have asked even up front is, what's the story with the mustache? How did that
Yeah,
come
the
about?
mustache. So I've been growing it for just about a year. I didn't used to have a mustache. I never really had one, and then I was Mario for Halloween last year, and so I spent a few weeks growing a mustache, and then I never shaved it. So now we're coming up on a year now, and yeah.
I feel like you look more like a Luigi than a Mario.
Okay, I've been told that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So for those that are just listening, he has a very thick, very handsome-looking mustache on his face that's
Thank you.
almost crossing over into handlebar mustache.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about what you do for a living. So home inspectors, not everyone knows exactly what a home inspector does. So maybe if you can share what it is, like what it is specifically you do with your job and how important that is for people to have on their homes.
Yeah, sure. So first, I like to distinguish. I inspect for home buyers as opposed to for a city. So there's inspectors that inspect new construction or remodels for the city to make sure that everything is done to code, and that's very important. I inspect for buyers, and so not just new houses, but also older homes that they're purchasing. Um, so what I do when I do a home inspection is I go through all the major systems. And so I'm looking at plumbing, electrical, HVAC, the roof, the structure, and then the buyer comes at the end and I take them through the home and I show them all the things that are having issues. I go over the life expectancies of the major systems and walk them through the house, and they can take that list and decide whether they still want to buy the house. Sometimes there's so much going on that they feel overwhelmed and it's not a project they want to take on. They can take the list and negotiate with the sellers to either get a better price or get some things fixed, or they can use it as a to-do list down the road to fix the things once they're in the house. So
Okay.
it's very important. Sometimes it goes very smoothly and there's a handful of maintenance items to be done. Other times there's bigger concerns that they were not expecting, roofs that need to be replaced or more significant foundation issues, things like that.
Yeah. Okay. And I know it's really important for real estate agents to have relationships with home inspectors. My wife is a real estate agent, and so the home inspection, just as a personal note, the home inspection piece has been a very important piece for myself in purchasing different properties. In particular, a lot of times when you're working with contractors, they don't necessarily always do what they say they're going to do. So you get the
Sure.
home inspection and you find out that there's, X, Y, and Z wrong. And you may ask that contractor, in the negotiations, or the seller in the negotiations, hey, can you fix, that faucet, or hey, the vent from the kitchen actually does not extend all the way up to the roof and out the house. So can you please make sure that's connected? But sometimes you can ask for those things, and if you don't have a good home inspection, they may not necessarily do it. They may tell you that they did it,
Yeah.
but you can't see inside the walls. And so, um, with most of the home purchases that we've done, we've actually had the home inspector go out once, twice, three times just to make sure that laundry list that we came back with was actually completed. And so it's a very important piece because, again, and unless you're crawling behind the walls and you actually know this stuff yourself, which the majority of people do not, I
Yeah.
certainly am one of those. You're a very vital piece in that. And so, do you have a lot of experience with having to come out to a house once, twice, three times?
Yeah, so I'll do re-inspections. It's it's usually best if a buyer can negotiate concessions where they get funds at closing, and then they can take those funds and make the repairs themselves. Um, Sometimes they'll negotiate the sellers to fix things, and in that situation, it seems like sellers are more inclined to spend as little as possible to check the box that they made the repair, but it's not always done as well as it could have been, or they'll try to do things themselves, and they might not know all the nuances of what needs to be done with the repair. And so I've definitely gone back out and found things that aren't done as well as they should have been.
Yeah. Okay.
And in a lot of
And
cases, it's not that the seller is trying to be malicious or take advantage, but they might make the repair themselves and not know how to do it right.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that's a very valid point that you just made because, specifically, let's say like they put in a shower, they installed a shower by themselves, and they may say, "Hey, yeah, I did this, I did it right." But again, it's one of those things. If you can't really see behind the walls, you have no idea. There might be a leak there, and there actually might be mold all in the walls, which
Yeah.
means that the entire thing needs to be ripped out, that needs to be remediated, and a new shower put in there. And so,
Yeah.
um, the seller's not doing it on purpose. They may not have known it wasn't done correctly.
Yeah. Decks are another good example where a lot of people will build their own deck, and there's a lot of technical rules when you build a deck on how to make it as strong as possible and follow all the modern standards. And a lot of homeowners or even handymen don't know all of those technicalities. And so oftentimes buyers come in and the deck can look great, but it's not as strong or built the way that it should be. And so you'll have posts that go into the soil and they're going to rot faster, or it might not be attached to the house the way that it should be, or the post might not be attached to the beam the way they should be. And so that's another example of where a seller might do something and not know that it's not done right.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good yeah, that's a good observation. I'm sure that's the case in a lot of people's homes that where they try to install a deck themselves.
Yeah,
So I happen to know actually that you are very knowledgeable in what you do, and so explain. I don't remember going to school and seeing a home inspection degree, and so how does one even navigate that path? How did you navigate that path to becoming gaining all this knowledge?
sure. So I started inspecting foreclosures, and I was doing routine inspections, and those eventually turned into initial inspections. And they had a lot of specific things that they wanted me to look at, and I learned a lot there through my training inspecting the foreclosures. Um, but it was still a pretty simple inspection. It's not anywhere near as detailed as what I do now. And so when I was preparing to inspect for buyers, I got certified with an association. And a lot of people don't know this, but in Utah, there's no license to be an inspector. Only about half of the states have an actual license where they require ongoing education and certain criteria before you can even inspect for buyers. Utah doesn't have that, but obviously it's still a good idea to get certified at a minimum. And so I got certified with InterNACHI. There's two main associations. I'm a part of InterNACHI. The other association is called ASHI. Both great associations. But they provide a lot of education. They'll give you your certification and tell you when you're ready, and then they do ongoing education down the road.
Okay.
I've done it
Okay. And
long
so that
enough. I've done it long enough now that I am now considered a certified master inspector, and I think you have to do, I think it was 1,000 inspections and a certain amount of education before you could reach that.
Wow, wow, 1,000 inspections. So you've already done 1,000 inspections.
Yeah, I am probably in the range of a little over 3,000 now.
Okay. Wow, that's
Quite
incredible.
quite a few.
And have those always been for your own business? So and actually, let me back up and ask that question. So as a home inspector, do you join a home inspection company, or does everyone start off as their own business? How did that start? How does that work? And then how did that work for you specifically?
Um, e- a lot of people find success with either route. So I inspected the foreclosure, so it was in a way I inspected HUD and Fannie Mae homes, and so there was a field service manager that maintained all these vacant homes, and so that was kind of the company you might say that I was a part of. When I first inspected for buyers, I started my own company from the start. Some inspectors will join a multi-inspector firm, a company that already has all the business, and they have a lot of support in just walking into the job. I I like the idea of having a little more control and being able to scale it and change the pricing and work with who I want to work with.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's really the idea behind being an entrepreneur, right? Is you have that flexibility and freedom. Although most of the time, it can feel like that flexibility and freedom is non-existent because we kind of work ourselves into this busy life. And so, ex tell me what that was like when you decided to start your own company. I mean, was was there nerve behind that? Were you already pretty confident that you were going to gain clients and have a business out of this?
Um, not not necessarily. I'd say the opposite. Coming from the foreclosure side, that was going well. I liked inspecting the foreclosures, and luckily for the nation, that Great Recession ended and things got a lot better. But that meant for my job that was non-existent anymore. There was no more foreclosures to inspect, and so I got pushed out of that and had to make the decision of what to do next. And so I made the leap to go out on my own, and I worked hard to grow a referral base, and it's really worked out through the years. But I was definitely nervous at the time.
Yeah. And what kind of activities were you doing to get those clients? I mean, it's mostly real estate agents. Is that accurate?
Yeah, definitely. I get most of my referrals through real estate agents, And I have a lot of respect for the agents that refer business to me because I'm very thorough, which some agents don't love because um, it can create some hiccups in the transaction. But great agents want a good inspector because they don't want surprises down the road. And so I have a lot of respect for the agents that do refer me work. But starting out, I used to go to a lot of open houses and I would meet new agents and introduce myself. I give everybody that I inspect for a little home maintenance book. And so I remember I used to take those home maintenance books and give them out to agents as just an introduction.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll say just through personal experience, I would rather have a very, very thorough home inspector. I mean, I would rather know everything that's on there and then be able to have a personal discussion with my home inspector of, okay, so now we've got all of these documented. We can present that to the seller. They may not enjoy it, but now you can tell me which ones are really the most necessary to actually take care of because they're not going to negotiate in all of
For
the items
sure.
that you came back with, but being able to understand which ones are necessary now and which ones are going to be necessary maybe in like 10 years,
Yeah.
to be able to fix. And so is that something you help your clients go through?
Yeah. So at the end of the inspection, when I go through the walkthrough, at the very end of the walkthrough, I like to recap all the most important items. And sometimes that's two things, sometimes that's eight things. But either the things that are most costly to repair or the biggest safety hazards.
Yeah, yeah. And so the real estate agents that you've worked with have obviously been very appreciative of this, and so they refer you other business. And so is that do those agents then anytime that they have a buyer or possibly a seller, I suppose,
Mhm.
um, are they just referring all of that business out to you?
So some agents will contact me directly and set up the inspection. A lot of agents will give the buyer a list. And I think in their position, that helps limit liability a little bit. Um, you don't you don't want, the buyer doesn't know me, they don't know my experience, and so they want to give them the option to look into a few inspectors that they deem reliable and read reviews or call them and ask about experience. And so that's what a lot of agents will do is give the buyer a list of a couple people. And whenever somebody calls, sometimes my prices are a touch higher than others. I always recommend to them that they read my reviews online, and I share that I'm a certified master inspector and what that means, and let them make the decision. And more times than not, they seem to go with me when they call.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And I think that's very important what you're doing there and highlighting the education that you have and the differences there. And I think as business owners, there's a way to do that without sounding petty or like you're creating conflict
Yeah,
against other competitors. It's really just highlighting, look, this is my resume, this is my education, and then I'm going to put it in your hands, and you can decide from there. But at least then you have that information that I have this higher education than some of the others.
yeah, yeah. I agree.
What what are some of the challenges that you have in this business, like particularly to being a home inspector? What are some of the challenges as a business that you face?
Um, as an inspector, it seems like I'm constantly making someone upset. And so, you have buyers on one hand that come in, they're very excited that they finally got a house under contract, they found a house that they love, and a lot of times I have to give them bad news that there's issues going on or things that might cost a fair amount of money, and that makes them unhappy. Um, or on the flip side, that information is given to the seller, and they're trying to negotiate things, and the seller is unhappy with me. Or the buyer decides to search for another house and maybe the agent's upset. Um, and so it's I was gonna say it's a fine line, but it's really not a line I walk. I just present the information and I put it in perspective, and whatever happens happens.
Yeah, yeah. And that's probably something where you wish that everyone had a bit more of a stoic philosophy, right? Because you really
Definitely.
are just presenting information, and it's either the buyer or the seller that's attaching emotion to that information. And I
Certainly.
can see that it would be a very emotional business to be in, because on the buyer side, they just looking at the house, the aesthetics, the layout, the feel of the inside, the
Mhm.
outside, they say this is the perfect house. And then here you are delivering, it's the perfect house except for the floor is probably going to fall through, and then you're going to be living in the dirt,
Right.
or whatever it may be. And then that's got to be a tough pill to swallow, because they don't want to walk away from that. And
Yeah.
then again, on the seller side, they just desperately need to sell the house and go to wherever they're going to.
Right. They might have
But it,
another house under contract and they need to close to be able to close on their house. And
Yeah, yeah. So I can see that could be a major challenge, to tiptoe around people's emotions and just say, this is why you hired me. This is why I was hired, is to give you the information, and that's really all I'm doing here. But
yeah,
here you are getting very emotional about it, and I don't know what to do because all I did was do my job.
right. Right.
Yeah.
I'd say another challenge is real estate, that the market can change so much. 6 months from now might be a very different market than what we're in today, for better or for worse. And that's something that I don't have any control over. I can do my best at marketing and giving buyers as much value as possible. But if rates go up another percent and there's less buyers, I have no control over that. And so it's just being mindful and budgeting and preparing for those times where it's a little slower than others.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that you just brought up, because I think a lot of times people understand that with real estate agents, right? That it's very cyclical. We've been in a big time housing boom for quite some time, and now we're seeing the other side of that cycle a little bit as interest rates come up and everyone's wondering what's going to happen. But I guess you never really consider all of the other people in the industry that it also affects. So when when there is a housing market downturn, that affects your business as well. I guess there's not as many people selling homes or buying homes, or how does that work in your specific industry?
Yeah, I mean, similar to agents, there's surprisingly recently, um, rates are on the higher end of what they've been recently. And surprisingly, I'm not I'm not nearly as slow as I would have imagined that I would be, with rates being at what they're at. And I think that there's right now some buyers that either are using cash or taking advantage of houses that are sitting a little longer. Um, but it's certainly something that I've had to navigate and be mindful about, because there have been times where when rates started to go up, it people got nervous and they took a step back. And there was, last November, December were much slower than November and Decembers that I've had in the past.
Hmm. And so, what do you do during those down periods? I mean, you've got a family, right? You've got a
Yeah.
couple of kids. You have a girlfriend. What's like you got to put food on the table. So, what do you do in those downturns to provide a living?
So for myself, I think it's more important what I do when I'm busy. Um, Putting away savings when I'm very busy, because on the flip side of it, there are times where, after the or through the pandemic, I was so busy that it was very fruitful. And so I was able to save for the times to where when it slows down, I'm able to enjoy that time and, you know, spend more time and more focus on other projects, and giving my attention to other things, and just enjoying the little bit of a break when I do have it.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm curious. So let's say, in more of a bit busy period, what does your typical day look like?
Sure. So, uh, an average day for me, I do two inspections a day. one in the morning, one in the afternoon. When it gets very busy, I'll do 3 inspections a day, which is then pushing into the evening, which means I'm getting home closer to 7 or 8 instead of
Yeah.
5.
And
Uh,
what about, and sorry to cut you off, but just painting the picture from like the second you get up to all the way through the day. So more of just, and I know you've got maybe two or three inspections, but I'm sure it starts at home, right,
yeah,
with the
yeah. So
kids.
I work out of a home office. I wake up around 6 to 6:30. That first morning time. That's when I write my reports from the day before. And
Okay.
so I'll finish up my reports, and most of the report writing is done in the house on my iPad, but then I still have to associate some photos and tidy up some of the narratives so that it's very specific to this house and not just a general comment. And so I write my reports in the morning, I get those sent out. I will drop my kids off at school and then head to my first inspection. I usually start my first inspection at 8:30, and then I'll have the walkthrough at 10:30 or 11. And the walkthrough takes 30 or 40 minutes. The agent comes, the buyer comes, we go through the house, um, and then there's a short time for lunch. Um, I go to Jimmy John's quite a bit. It's
Yeah.
they say freaky fast, but it's true, and it's not that I love Jimmy John's so much, but I use the app. I swing by Jimmy John's, head to my next house, and in between this time, I'm usually stopping by other houses and picking up radon monitors, or stopping by the lab where I drop off samples from meth tests that I take. And so there's a lot of stops along the way. But I'll do my 2 or 3 inspections and then work my way home.
So, a couple of things. One, Jimmy John's is incredible.
Yeah.
I grew up in the Midwest, and I had that all. I mean, that got me through college was Jimmy John's,
Okay.
but I hadn't had it for a very long time. And then I went on a guys trip with some of my friends to Austin, and I had Jimmy John's again, and I missed that bread. That bread
Yeah.
is so good.
Yeah.
So the other thing I want to bring up, meth tests. So you brought up meth, and
Yeah.
some people who might be listening to this in different parts of the country, maybe that might not be as regular of a thing. But where you are in Utah, the meth test and the radon test are so incredibly important. So explain those, and
Yeah.
I guess why it might be different in different areas of the country.
Sure. So first, radon. Radon is an odorless gas. It comes up from the ground, and the EPA says it's the second leading cause of lung cancer. And so if you have
Wow.
high levels of radon, you can mitigate it. You put in a special vent with a fan, and that moves all the radon outside the house, instead of it coming up through the foundation and through the slab into that living space. Um, so when I test for radon, I use a continuous radon monitor. It's a little electronic monitor that goes in the basement or on the lowest livable space, and that runs for at least 48 hours. And then it tells us the average level of radon in the house. And if it's above 4 picocuries per liter, that's when you want to mitigate it. The World Health Organization actually recommends a little bit lower number. They recommend anything over 2.7.
Okay.
So that's radon. Meth, as in methamphetamine, the drug. So if it's ever been smoked or cooked in the house, it can be a health concern. But the other concern is, let's say you don't test for it, you live in the house, you don't experience those health concerns, but then you go to sell it later and someone else tests and they find it. As the seller, you can be stuck needing to decontaminate the house, which can be very expensive. You have to remove all the carpet. They spray a special cleaner on all the walls, and that neutralizes the meth so that it's safe to live in.
Okay. Okay. And so it's how often would you say you come by houses that actually test positive for methamphetamines?
KSL did a report, and they said about 1 in 8 homes has levels of meth, and that seems to be accurate with the test that I do. About 1 in 8. So
That is bonkers.
it's
That so
not big.
that many it's that big of an issue that
And
and it's all just hidden in the house. Like I guess you wouldn't
yeah,
know
you don't
otherwise.
you don't see it. You don't necessarily smell it. there are signs when it gets very high. People talk about a cat urine smell, and they look for that. But as an inspector, I've only experienced that less than 10 times. And you have to have extremely high levels. So, as a reference, the state limit is 1 microgram per per square. I think it's a 100 square centimeters. And so anything over 1 microgram is required by the state to be decontaminated. There's houses where when you start to get the real heavy odor, you're at 50 or 75 micrograms, so way above the state limit. You could be in a house that has unacceptable levels and not know.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible.
And
That's
I always
incredible.
tell people it's not a reflection of who's living in the house. When I recommend testing for meth, it's not because I look around and think, oh, it looks like these people do meth. It's guests that might have stayed there, or people that might have rented the house in the past, or even contractors that built the house. I recommend that people test new construction even.
Wow. Wow. That's mind blowing, scary, and also scary that you're around this. And so, I mean, when you are you ever worried that the residue could like I don't know stay on you somehow, and then you bring it home to your house with your kids? Is there? I mean, should there be a concern about that at all?
I have experienced, I got a real bad headache once, and that was one of the houses where it was pretty obvious something had been going on. That house had been condemned. And so, if in situations like that, I will oftentimes wear a mask through my inspection. But it's pretty rare that I feel that concerned that I need to protect myself from just breathing the air.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Wow. Well, you're clearly very busy. There's a lot going on in your career. I know from just seeing your social media that you're active, you're very healthy, and you do a lot of Spartan races.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned your day starts at 6:30, and you're coming home, maybe 6 or 7. How do you find the time to make sure that you're also getting your fitness in?
Sure. So I mean, it's a priority to me, and so even if I'm only going at a minimum to the gym a couple times a week, I make sure I make it happen, and then I also try to include my family. And I live in a community where we have a community center where they have a gym and they also have basketball courts. And so when I go to the gym, my kids go with me. They play basketball. It's a nice time to talk in the car on the way over to the community center. And then after my workout, I'll play basketball for a little bit with my kids, and it's a good time, and it's a good time to spend together as well.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I mean, that's so fantastic that they have, developments that are like that now. And so you mentioned drive over. So how large of a development is this?
It's about a 10-minute drive. I live on one far side of the community, and the community center is on the opposite side. We used to live also in this community, and we lived close enough that we could walk if we wanted. And it was a little bit of a walk, but we did it occasionally. We still drove most of the time. But now we're a little bit far enough away that it's definitely worth driving.
Yeah. And what I think is so valuable about that too is, and a lot of books on like habit, I'm blanking on his name right now, Atomic Habits. Um,
Oh,
yeah,
now it's gonna
the
bother me as
bestseller.
well.
I know, I know it's gonna bother me too. And I actually met him in person. He
Oh
was a pretty
wow.
cool guy. Yeah, he came and spoke at a conference. But they say to make it easy, and so to incorporate, when you have such a busy lifestyle, and you're wanting to, not neglect other areas of your life, like your health and your family time, which I love that you incorporate the two together. So you're you're making it even easier. So you're making it easy because you live in a development that has a community center that your kids can play at and that has a gym, but you're also incorporating all those things together. And so um, whether you may have realized that or not, it's such a successful, it's a trait of very successful people who make those parts, they make what's important to them easy to do. And so you're setting yourself up for success living in that community and being able to have that time with your kids while you're also focusing on your health.
Yeah, I had been intentional about, creating an activity that we could do together, but I hadn't even thought about, you know, living in an area where that is so accessible and how that does make it so much easier. And that's a good point.
Yeah, and so I imagine that bonding time also pays dividends that you can have that quality time with them. You could feel that part of your life fulfilled, and that probably helps you um, then be better as a home inspector and a business owner who has very very busy days.
Yeah, certainly. I think it's when you stay active and you stay fit, it's easier to wake up in the morning, or if you go to bed at a better hour, it's easier to wake up and it's easier to get all the tasks done in your day that you need to accomplish.
Yeah, yeah, and it probably gives you the energy and the mind share to be present with your kids.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate having you on the show today. I learned a lot. One, I think our listeners probably learned a lot about the home inspector role and all that goes into it because I don't think a lot of people have much knowledge of everything that goes into your job and your duties, and then the challenges of a very emotional process and how you can very much get caught up in that. And that can be a challenge to overcome, but it looks like you have done so very successfully.
Thank you, Mike. This has been great. Congratulations on your podcast. It seems like it's been going very well for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And so, Andrew, if people want to get a hold of you, where could they get a hold of you?
So a lot of agents will text me directly. I have an Instagram account, and it's kind of a mix of both business and personal. I post what I'm up to day to day, but also some of the crazier findings I see in houses, or the um, more extravagant houses that I sometimes am fortunate enough to be able to see. So I have my Instagram account. It's Andrew Jolley. I think my handle is Jolley Andrew, EY on my last name. Or
Okay.
just text me or
So
call me.
Jolley Andrew is the handle on Instagram. Okay. Text, and is there an email or a website?
Yeah, my website is jodahomeinspections.com, and my phone number, I'm sure we can link it as well, 801.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, and Andrew, I can't wait to catch up with you some more later.
Definitely. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Take care.